name's Alan Romano, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also a ketamine-assisted psychotherapist. I've been practicing for the last 6 years doing that work. I've been in the field doing counseling for about 11 years. And yeah, my main focus is treating PTSD and kind of unresolved trauma. And I kind of see most diagnoses as that. So that's the work that I do. My journey really began back in the 90s, right? Like under the kind of the psychedelics and the shadows of prohibition, really. I think of it as coming to age on the war on drugs, right? Back then, psychedelics weren't medicines. They weren't sacred, right? They were criminal. So my first LSD experience were very much shaped by that matrix of setting, right? Under the setting of fear, scanning the environment for danger, essentially. The setting left a lot of room for hypervigilance. And so to begin with, psychedelics to me are amplifiers, right? They amplify what's present. And so under the setting of the war on drugs, what was present was, the fear of taking LSD and jumping out of a window, right? I started using them with friends, but also my uncle was a part of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang. And so he was big into LSD. And so he started giving me or selling me LSD right back in the 90s and kind of guided me into some very strong experiences without any knowing. I kind of trusted him very blindly. I was young, and so I remember one of the first times I tripped, I was 14 this time. It was actually my second trip, but I had gotten sugar cubes, and he gave me 10 of them. And he said, "These two are for you." He said, "You eat these two. And the rest, the other 8, give to your friends." And so we all dosed. And right away, I realized that what I took was way more than what anybody else took. Because everybody else was kind of okay, had a good time laughing. And I was being fragmented through time. And, like it completely broke the illusion of time for me and kind of fragmented my identity at the same time. And it was a very challenging experience. And I remember seeing my uncle a week later, and he asked me about the trip, how it went. And I kind of told him it was terrifying. I said it lasted for almost 2 days, because it did. It was about 48 hours. And he laughed and he said, "Well, I gave you 8 doses of pure LSD 25 and everybody else had 1. And that to me was very unethical, of course, like now looking back, right? Especially him being my uncle and me being a child. But informed consent is so important to me, especially as a therapist or as a human. Knowing what you're taking is so important. And I didn't have that awareness, and I learned that the hard way. And so my early experiences were shaped by that setting and left me very shooken. And so after my first 2 real experiences with LSD, I kind of wrote it off. I was like, never again. Oddly enough, a few weeks later, I came across MDMA. And because of what I heard about MDMA, my friends kind of shared, a different type of experience. But when I took it, it brought me right back into that space initially, and the fear took hold right away. And I left the room where all my friends were sitting, and I kind of went to hide in my parents' room. They were out of town. And my friend Jacob came in, and he said to me, "What's going on?" And I kind of told him I was freaking out, not having a good time. And he said to me something very simple. He said he chose to take this with us. And that statement was so powerful to me, and I didn't know it at the time, but it's kind of acceptance commitment therapy, right? The value behind making a decision to take something. And that changed everything for me. As soon as he said it, the fear dissipated. And of course, MDMA downregulates the amygdala and fear processing, so I was able to kind of be fully vulnerable in front of people for the first time. And it really opened up my life into a different way, to where I was all of a sudden able to be myself in front of people that I didn't know, right? And full vulnerability, but it also started a kind of lifelong addiction to substances, because we were using drugs in the 90s. We were using medicines, and And due to some other issues I had, I was part of Camp Lejeune. So I was in utero there, and then born in Connecticut, but spent the first 2 years of my life on Camp Lejeune base, so consuming, bathing in that water. Very toxic, right? And a lot of neurological disorders came from that, which I have. One of that being restless leg syndrome. Combine that with Purdue Pharma in the early 2000s being placed on OxyContin at age 18. I was, at 18 years old, maxed out on, was taking 380 milligram OxyContins a day, prescribed for 2 years. And this was by a very good professional doctor. It wasn't one of the Florida pill mills. It was a really well-respected neurologist who at the end of the 2 years apologized to me and said I was being told bad signs and never putting you on that medicine, right? Didn't matter. My body still had the dependency for it. And so I kind of have struggled for years with opioid dependence. And so fast forward to kind of 2014, I got clean. I went on medication-assisted treatment, took Suboxone, and that kind of got me back into school and into a career path. And I decided to go be a therapist because everybody told me, go see a therapist, they'll help you. They never did. And so I was like, I'd go figure it out for myself, you know? And so that was kind of the beginning of my use with psychedelics, taking them as psychedelic drugs instead of sacraments. And that all changed after a motorcycle accident occurred halfway through my graduate program. February of 2018, I was in a head-on motorcycle accident. I was hit by a Jeep, and I was put in a drug-induced coma for 5 days because of Suboxone. And I don't know, a lot of people don't know about Suboxone's potency, about what it does, but it really, a good drug, it saved my life, right? But also it took away so much from me that I didn't know about it. First off, it blocked the ability for pain management post-accident. And I had broken my spine in 7 places. I shattered my collarbone. I have metal in the screws, and my nose was disconnected from my face. Eyes swollen shut. And they gave me the strongest doses of Dilaudid they could IV in the emergency room, and that didn't even keep me out of withdrawal from Suboxone. It was shocking. I left the hospital in a lot of pain, and they put me on pain medicine, but as soon as I got home, I stopped it and went back on Suboxone just so the withdrawal would go away. So I was out of withdrawal, which kind of calmed me emotionally a little bit, but didn't do anything for them. You know, the motorcycle accident, when I was in the motorcycle accident, I never rode intoxicated, definitely. Like, that was something I never did because I love to ride. It's a beautiful thing. But when I was in the crash, I did happen to have a sheet of LSD on me. And I remember a few weeks after getting home, I was, for the first time, left alone with a friend, and I went out to the garage to collect my belongings that the cops brought back to me, right? And somehow they brought back the sheet of LSD that was on the motorcycle. They didn't find it, luckily. And I began not knowing at the time what I was doing because I hadn't done anything like that before. I was always kind of cautious, did it with friends, took lower doses, but for some reason I felt the need to go really deep and take very high doses, and so I began to eat 10, 15 hits at a time of very strong LSD and sit with self and do that for, not day after day, but once or twice a month for about 6 months. And that did a lot for me. In hindsight, like, that 6 months of healing physically and using LSD to address my cognitive issues, it kind of made me okay being who I am for the first time. It was like the first time I connected to my authenticity and detached from outcomes of what anybody else thought. Right? It was like finally I felt okay inside of my body, but I still had this lingering problem of Suboxone, right? And so during my undergraduate program, I was introduced to Ibogaine and Ayahuasca because I was writing all the time about psychedelics because they'd been a part of my life, been a part of my growth, my spiritual belief system, my community since adolescence. And so I was writing about it, not knowing I'd be able to use it later in my career, because back then there was, psychedelics weren't part of the therapy room. And so my professor introduced me to Ivy and ayahuasca just through reading material. So I was reading about it. And after my accident, I really felt that, first off, I kind of felt robbed in a sense because it did not have a near-death experience. I did almost die, and I was in the coma for 5 days. And when I came out, I thought it was 20 minutes after the accident or the thing. And like, there's a part of me that knew that should have been a life-altering experience. Like, but it wasn't. It was, but it wasn't, So I kind of made the plan. I went back to graduate school in 2018 in the fall of 18, 9 months after the accident. And I spent a year in the program. And that's when I realized how bad the brain injury really affected me, because healing physically, I wasn't doing much with my mind, right? I didn't have to think, I didn't have to write. And going back to school, that changed. So I just started using my mind again. And I've always been good with school. I like to write, love to read. I found that I would become very overwhelmed and would actually go into a type of panic where I'd lose time and space, just completely forget where I was. In the middle of class, I wouldn't know what was going on, how I got there, type of thing, and I'd have to close my eyes and ground and bring myself back to the moment. And so that summer when I had break, I decided to go to Mexico for the first time to do Ibogaine and ayahuasca with the intention of getting off Suboxone. And so that's really when my relationships to the medicines changed greatly. It changed from doing psychedelic drugs in the 90s, evolving into doing more self-work with it, kind of unconsciously medicine work, and then to very intentional work with what I now refer to as entheogenic medicines, right? Like, the molecules didn't change, though. The molecules have always been what they've been, right? But the set and setting makes such a difference. The container in which we travel and creates that experience greatly. So yeah, I went to Mexico in August or July of 19, and I spent 30 days there preparing, doing a dieta for Ibogaine and ayahuasca, which included, it was supposed to only be one Cambo session, but it ended up being two because of how strong of dependency I had. Cambo is great for titrating off opioids. It really forces, kind of very unpleasantly, but it's like cramming 3 months worth of withdrawal into 20 minutes. I mean, but then afterwards, your receptors are more replenished back to a more balanced state. Not fully, but like, he was able to lower my dose because they switched me from long-lasting opioids to Suboxone onto morphine, which is, it's easier to get off of short-acting opioids. So they put me on morphine, but I was taking 400 milligrams of morphine every 4 hours, and that didn't even keep me out of withdrawal. Weak. I was so sick. I was supposed to do Cambo the first day I got there. You have to drink some water before you do Cambo, at least 1.5 liters. The second I finished the 1.5 liters, I threw it all up. And for 5 days, I was throwing up. I couldn't even hold anything down. And so the Cambo, after the first one, when he gave me my morphine dose, it actually took me out of withdrawal for the first time. And I didn't know it, but he actually cut the dose in half too. So we went from 400 to 200. And it took me out of withdrawal where 400 didn't. So Cambo was really great to facilitate that process. But he needed to get me lower, so I ended up doing a second Cambo session, which was one of the most hellish 3 hours of my life. Cambo generally lasts for 20 minutes, and especially after they remove the medicine, it goes away relatively quickly. It stuck with me for about 3.5, 4 hours, and I was screaming, crying, rolling around on the ground. It was quite a painful experience, and I bring that up with intention, and I'll go back to that. But that brought me to Ibogaine, and so Ibogaine was a phenomenal medicine to me. It shocked me because I've been through every treatment approach there is in Western medicine when it comes to opioid dependence. Right? There's nothing like it. I mean, Ibogaine stops withdrawal right away. I took the test dose, and right away, not only did the withdrawal go away, but the restless leg syndrome I had my whole life was gone. So for the first time in my life, I think I was 34 at that point, I laid still in a bed for 30 minutes comfortably. And I had never done that before. And that was shocking to me. And then I got the flood dose of the Ibogaine, which altered my life greatly. It was such a deep experience. And when I came out of it, I had felt a complete release of all my pain and suffering. I felt no dependency, no craving for substances, but I also didn't have anything in me. It was like it wiped me clean and there is nothing left. It left me flat, emotionless, right? And so luckily, I was there with somebody who knows the process, and I was doing 3 ayahuasca sessions later. So I got bit by a brown recluse. He was right in between an ayahuasca. So I had a bad infection, really bad infection. And Luis, the owner of Rite of Passage, kind of shared with me, look, there's no contraindication. You can do the ayahuasca while taking these antibiotics. He said, however, I don't know that it won't minimize the visionary effects or the effects of the medicine for you. So either you stay until the infection clears up or take a higher dose and also do Yopo, which at the time I didn't know what Yopo was, but I agreed because I had been there for a month. I was ready to go home. I did 3 nights in a row of ayahuasca ceremonies with Yopo, so I drank very big glasses and then got 4 intranasal hits of Yopo from the shaman. And that instantly, and Yopo is 5-MeO, DMT, and so kind of to me, there was not, and I didn't know this at the time, but I was told you have to bring a sacrifice to the medicine. And I did because I went through hell to get to it. A lot of terror, right? Like the trauma of withdrawal is, I think, understated in the medical community. Right, like withdrawal itself causes PTSD for a lot of people, and so it wasn't just withdrawing; it was also flashback. It was terror. I compare that kind of withdrawal to being in a bad acid trip. It's so emotionally tormenting, and so when I did the ayahuasca, those first 3 nights I did it, it was beautiful. It was like there was no surrender. There was no purge. I laid down and just went into the medicine space. And ayahuasca really breathed life, love, and acceptance back into my being. It like breathed emotion back into me. And I left there in the best place emotionally I'd ever been in my life. It was shocking because I was also in one of the worst conditions physically because I had this brown recluse infection, which ended up being 6 weeks of IV antibiotics here in the States, 7 different antibiotics before they cleared up the infection. They almost took my leg at one point. The crazy thing was, none of that bothered me. I was so happy, filled with joy, right? Like, none of it stressed me out. But then I go back to grad school after that. Life comes back, right? The conditioning comes back, and slowly it unwinds. And so that first year, I went back into the medicine 3 more times, once in Peru and twice back in Mexico, and then kind of because of relapsing back into opioid use. But what was interesting was I relapsed about 3 months after for 2 weeks. And for the first time in my life ever, without going inpatient, I was able to say, I have to stop this. And I was able to sit in withdrawal on my own at home and still go to school, which was shocking to me because never possible before. And so that really kind of brought me to the end of grad school and kind of set my career path into working with psychedelics, because I graduated during COVID and I was working in substance use treatment, and I lost my job because of COVID and ended up a little depressed, wanted to go do the medicine again, and found a ketamine clinic here in Florida. And I thought, I'll give it a try. I was kind of shocked too, and I think it's almost like divine intervention in the sense that I never tried ketamine as a child because I did every other drug there was on the streets back then. Ketamine was very prominent, but I never came across it. And so when I came across it as a medicine and went to it, I had a really good experience with it, and it brought a lot of closure to some of the stuff that ayahuasca left open, and really set my career path into working into psychedelic integration. So I went back to the clinic after and said, I want to work with you guys, and started working with them, and have done a lot of medicine work since, both in trainings, experiential trainings in the Netherlands. I've also done experiential trainings in California for Cambo. So I mentioned Cambo, I said I'd come back to, because to me, not a typical psychedelic, right? Like, it's not visionary the way other medicines are, but to me, it is definitely one of the most potent entheogens there is, because of the way it works is like completely opposite of Western medicine. Western medicine is all about comfort. And to me, healing is not comfortable. And that's what psychedelics have really shown me, is like healing is about confronting pain. It's not, it's about altering our relationship to pain, because we can't take pain away, right? Like, wounds are always going to be part of our existence. They don't leave us, but our relationship to them can change over time. And that's kind of what the medicine really showed me, is how to sit with my emotional pain in a way to confront it instead of numbing it with other drugs. Does that make sense? Cambo showed me that in a very profound way, because it makes you feel everything really intensely, very uncomfortably. There's nothing pleasant about the experiences at all, but the aftermath is beautiful, especially when I went back to it not coming off of opioids. The first time I did it, it was like my 5th time doing it, but my first time not coming off opioids. The emotional purge began before he even burned the points on me and put the medicine on. It was like I had and I didn't know it, but at the time, it was like it was already paired with the process. And so as soon as the ceremony started, the music started, the emotional purge came on, and I had immense gratitude for Cambo, and all of a sudden saw it as its own medicine, and really like a profound medicine. And so when I had the opportunity, I went to the Psychedelic Science Convention at 23, which was a really great experience, and came across a Cambo training. And so I signed up to take that training, and have been working with it, professionally and personally ever since, for almost 2 years. I would, what really drove me to kind of, go into this field and help other people was medical wounding, is what I call it, because I have PTSD from doctors, because we're kind of taught in our culture, not taught, we're indoctrinated into the system to trust authorities very blindly, right? And a doctor is a practice, just like anybody else. And a lot of practice is built on bad science. And so my own kind of life's wounds and then getting wounded by the medical system when seeking help for psychological discomfort and being more traumatized as a result drove me to want to help other people. Because when I found my own healing path, because my belief is you are the medicine. I am the medicine, right? Like, it's not psychedelics, it's what they connect us to within ourselves. And so that was a kind of organic unfolding for me. And that really drove me to want to work with other people because I kind of saw the need for, even like people I went to school with who were intelligent, good book work, right? Like, doesn't necessarily translate to being able to hold space for somebody else's healing process. Is like, I think you have to have walked through your own fire in order to walk somebody else or walk along somebody else in theirs. And so my life's wounds really are what accumulated to the desire to help other people. And then, kind of finding entheogenic medicines right in the middle of my graduate program, and then kind of falling right into a ketamine clinic after losing a job at substance use treatment, which I was very disillusioned with anyway, because they put out, you go into substance use treatment here, going for cocaine, you come out on 10 different psychotropics, right? And like all of which have adverse effects, and people don't get informed consent about what that means, and that really bothers me. Also, we know of these other medicines that work great. In my research, I found that the National Institute of Drug Abuse knew about Ibogaine back in the early 70s, right? Before the war on drugs began. They actually had a whole protocol, and we're about to announce it to Congress that we want to start using Ibogaine instead of methadone. And I look back, I think, what would the world be like today if back in the 70s, instead of all these methadone clinics popping up, right, and then Suboxone in the 2000s, right, that we had Ibogaine clinics for the last 50 years, and we were treating opioid use with a medicine that not only treats dependency, but alters and is great, right? Like,
Right.
it says back to, in my opinion, our lineage and our ancestral traumas. And so we're able to kind of heal intergenerational wounds with that kind of medicine. Interestingly, too, it's like I was very drawn to leaving the country and doing medicine work to be able to work with other medicines. But Papa Iboga and Mother Ayahuasca both kind of told me you need to be in the US right now because that's where you could be most useful, essentially. You know what I mean? That's kind of the message I received from the medicine. And I've learned that when you listen to the medicine and you hear the message, if you don't follow through, it hurts. It's just this thing. It's like, I like to call it awareness as burden, right? Because their insight is burden. And that's part of informed consent for me when I work with people in psychedelic spaces. People come in with all these kinds of ideas of what that might look like, right? Like the silver bullet to cure all. And I'm like, no, it definitely is not, right? Like, it can help facilitate a process, sure. It could also deepen us into sadness because it can give us insight that we can't turn away from. And we kind of wake up into a world where everybody else is asleep type of thing. And I don't like to think, I don't kind of like spiritual awakening or something like that. It just means the idea that, like, we are all stuck in the hamster wheel of conditioning, right? And until we take something that allows us to step outside of that wheel and see that we're in it, we don't even know, right? And so to me, integration is a process of kind of having the default node network shut down, taking our conditioned beliefs away, and then going back to it. It is about the going back process and going back to the industrial world and to the unnatural circadian rhythms that we should with, right? I like to think of electricity as one of our largest collective wounds, because to me it is. It's one of the things that completely disconnects us from our natural rhythms. And the fragmented West is why I went into this work, to kind of
Very good.
put the pieces together in a sense. So right now, currently, I'm about to release a book. Hope March 17th is the tentative date, and I've been writing for the last 6 years for my own process for integration. And during the compilation of that, and and also working as a psychedelic integration therapist, I kind of wrote a theory on integration. Like, that wasn't my purpose, my intent, but it kind of organically unfolded that way. And because I've worked in the space a lot, I've done a lot of trainings, a lot of research, I know that there's not really a well-defined theory on integration. People talk about it in so many different kinds of ways. In most circles, integration is a conversation the day afterwards. Like, what occurred? How was it? What do you do with that? And that's kind of it. Then you go back into the hamster wheel, right? Back into the conditioning, and you get disconnected from that so quickly. And for me, it really showed me how much it's piecework. It's like piece by piece at a time, we get to see how conditioned we are and make those little changes. And so my work right now has been merely focused on finishing that book, because I want to release it, because I want to get my thoughts and ideas out there about integration, and help to kind of spread that more into the clinical field, because I want to bridge the gap more between Western medicine and more indigenous use of these medicines, with a respect for both, right? And that's a hard thing to do when I don't have much respect for Western medicine. Yeah. And that's not, individual doctors, they're all great people, a lot of them, right? Well-intended people. It's just evolving field, right? Psychology itself is very new. I mean, sure, it goes back philosophically a couple 100,000 years, right? But psychology as a discipline is relatively new, and it's evolving. And I know when I went to school, all they do is teach you theory. They don't teach you how to be a therapist. They don't teach you how to walk somebody through a process, right? And so that's kind of what part of the book is about. A lot of it is about my experiences. And so that's a big part of what I'm working on now. And but also I am a co-owner and founder of a ketamine clinic in Boynton Beach, Florida. And so I'm still doing that work. But also have a surgery coming up. So, and, interestingly, the medicines give us gifts in life if we receive, right? And so, I always wanted to be a father, but at 30 years old, I turned 30 in rehab. I realized, okay, I'm not going to be a dad, right? Like, this is not my path. And so I gave up on that idea, but I have a son now, and he's about to turn 1. And what's very interesting to me is that Ibogaine showed me all of that, and I didn't even know it. Right? It's like, and so I went back to Ibogaine last November for different reasons this time, because my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, was pregnant, and we were going to get married and have a baby. And I realized, right, like, I've done a lot of work on self, but I haven't really metabolized my own traumas, right? Like, I've gotten to a place where I'm stable and I can work and I can help others, but I still haven't done deep enough work for self to feel confident enough to show up for somebody. And I wanted that. And so I went back to Ibogaine last November, that intention, and Ibogaine is an interesting medicine. It held me for about 9 days, and that was shocking, even to the guy who, he's been serving it for 11 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, even Ibogaine was out of my system at that point. Even drug tested me. He's like, it's not there. You shoot me. But like, the Papa Iboga would not let me go. I was in that experience for 9 days, And when I say that I have about 5 to 10 years worth of memory during that week, that's a real thing. It's like I've written about maybe a third of that experience. And that's like 100 pages of material of deep experience. You know, Ibogaine is so different than any other psychedelic is. If there was, there's that movie Inception. And to me, that's Ibogaine. It's like not visionary in the same way other psychedelics are. It's indistinguishable from reality. You don't know you're in a journey. It's all so real. And it showed me a lot. It showed me my future without even knowing it. It's like coming back and 6 months later something happened and I'm like, wow, like I experienced that 6 months ago and I began like how was this possible? You know, and so yeah, bringing this work to a larger field, right? Because to me, like we come from a field, we come from source, right? Like, and everything that we experience is part of the field. And to me, the field is the larger container of the collective. And I've done a lot of medicine work for self and with other people. And I like to think of the idea of, right, what is the Ibogaine of the collective? What is the ketamine of the collective, right? What can break the rigidity of the governing bodies who govern through fear and control instead of really informed policy and informed consent, right? And so, you know, I guess that question, that idea of thinking of how do we extract healing from, healing is relational. I have found we don't heal in isolation. We can only do so much healing on our own. And when we start to heal relationally, we start to see the kind of quantum field and are connected to what I call my quantum tribe, the people that I have traveled with, you become very entangled with in some way, not a codependent type of way, but a very, you know, profound type of way where you start to see that these, in my opinion at least, these medicines are here with purpose. You know, that people talk about the psychedelic renaissance, and I like to share that it's not a renaissance, it's a reclamation, right? Like these medicines were oppressed, taken from us for a reason, because I do believe that governing authorities know their potential. And the real danger of psychedelics aren't they're going to make you jump out of a window. The danger is they make us question, you know, question authority, right? And kind of dissolve the boundary structures of dominant narratives that have been indoctrinated into us, right? And so my hopes is that in this growing field is that we can build containers large enough to hold these kind of experiences for more collective healing.